Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires. Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Will and welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast. In this episode, I have a special treat for you because I have specific studies and data and books and all sorts of great stuff prepared to tackle today's topic. But before we even get into any of that, I want to start off with a quote. So today I chose a quote by Napoleon Hill. Here's how it goes. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. It's one of his most famous quotes. And this man, if you're not familiar, he spent his whole life studying 500 of the wealthiest people in the world. These people were billionaires, and he had access to them in person thanks to, it's a long story, but thanks to the richest person in the world, Andrew Carnegie. So he spent his whole life studying these people, and then he wrote a bunch of books explaining how you can get wealthy too based on the patterns he learned. And so it's really cool, and it's a topic for another day. You know, that on its own, is that actually true? Can you really sprout wings if you believe it? I don't know. But let's get on to this podcast episode. We're going to be talking about how to stop comparing yourself to others and why this is so important. Now, I really want to go deep into this topic because I've studied the science of happiness so much on my blog. It's something that I know quite a lot about. I'm not saying I'm like an expert. I'm still learning, but it's also something I struggle with. And I also know that there's all different types of comparison. So I really have this whole lineup prepared for you so that you really get a expansive understanding of why this matters so much and maybe a few tips on how to solve it. Now, this is still something I'm struggling with myself, and everyone naturally does to a certain extent, but you have to set up systems so that you don't let your natural inclinations, your natural behaviors take over, because we're kind of wired in a way to do so unless we become aware of ourselves and prevent ourselves from doing so. So this is all really exciting stuff. And again, I like to come at this as a model of, hey, I'm just someone who's struggling just like you, and here's what I've learned on the journey. Here's all the science and data behind it, rather than I'm an expert who has achieved everything. I'm on top of the mountain, because I'm not. I'm struggling. So let's just get started, okay? First and foremost, there are multiple types of comparison out there. Now, the two biggest ones that we're going to cover are social comparison and what's considered maybe sexual or romantic comparison. And we're just going to keep it at those two broad types. I think a lot of different categories worth emphasizing all kind of fall under those two buckets, those two groups. So, for example, if you are comparing yourself or jealous of someone who makes a lot of money, who shows off his expensive car, that falls under what's considered basically social comparison in a way, because it's all about it's all related to social hierarchy and wealth. If you study history, there's a great book called The Red Queen on this. It's a book on the science of human attraction based on genetics, biology, evolutionary biology, and history. Although a lot of the points in the books are more theory than conclusions, as the author admits at the end. But yeah, if you want to just skip to the gold points of that book rather than read it, stay tuned on my blog, willyouLaugh.com, because there will be a jam-packed, amazing blog post on it coming up fairly soon. So stay tuned for that. Again, willyouLaugh.com is spelled exactly as you pronounce it or you would say it in real life. So go ahead and check out that blog and get ready for that post. But the basic point of that book that I want to get across to you is that they found that through history, men have pretty much, they started becoming more successful with girls thanks to the development of agriculture and farming. And the reason was because before that, everyone had to kind of hunt, and you couldn't really like hunt 1,000 times more than someone else. But with farming, you could, and that allowed certain people to accumulate a lot of wheat, which was a valuable resource, which created social status. And long story short, that's why it's all kind of related to social status and why females are attracted to that. And now the point of going through that is just to show you that all those bucket into social comparison. So that's what we're going to cover as one group. And then the other group is romantic and sexual comparison, which, you know, in certain ways, it's also kind of like social comparison because, you know, it's all kind of related. Status is related to attraction. But let's not get too deep here. Let's just keep it at that. You don't need to know the specifics. You just want to know how to stop comparing yourself to others and why it matters so much. So let's begin with why this is so important. Now, I have a study pulled up, and this study is actually 3 studies done by the same group of people, same institution. It's from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And it's called The Differentiation of Social Comparison Jealousy and Romantic Jealousy. Again, you can find this on Google Scholar yourself. But here's the basic idea. They did 3 different studies, and the results were startling. So in the first study, they had 174 college students rate 53 jealousy-provoking situations on numerous adjectives. And their responses were analyzed, and it basically revealed 2 basic dimensions. There's social comparison versus romantic. So that's why I'm grouping them as I did. And then fair versus unfair. So usually the big gist behind comparison is really resentment, frustration out of something being unfair. And in the second study, they had 18 undergraduates read brief vignettes, basically stories. I don't know why they're using these fancy terms, describing typical jealousy-provoking situations. Romantic versus social comparison situations were compared on several measures. Although both types of studies promote equal jealousy ratings, the romantic ones elicit considerably more negative effect. So what's the takeaway for you? Make sure you avoid romantic jealousy and comparison more, because it has a more negative effect on you and causes you to basically create more negativity towards others. And the third study, again, I like how they're, taking what they learned from the last study and using that to create another one. This time they studied 120 college students who read elaborate vignettes or stories, once again, that they were asked to imagine as if they were involved. Once again, the romantic stories and the social comparison stories were rated, but here were the results. They scored equally in terms of jealousy, but the romantic ones provoked more negative feelings about themselves, about the lover, and about the rival. Finding support a view that sees more value in differentiating situations that evoke jealousy than in attempting to differentiate the experience of jealousy versus envy. So you don't need to know you don't have to analyze that because I've done it for you. The basic idea is that if you're jealous because someone has a hotter girl or whatever, something related to romantic reasons, that's more dangerous to you, your own health, your own mental health, and others than social comparison. So emphasize getting rid of that, setting up systems to fix that first. And, there's a lot more evidence backing this up. In the book, Why Women Have Sex, I think it's one of the most well-known, scientifically researched, comprehensive, well put together, and easily readable books that I've come across. And I've read a lot of books similar to that, but It's basically just a book about what is attractive to a female, and it's highly comprehensive. Like the most bizarre minor things they'll add into the book. They'll be like, oh, in this study, if you dance and you move in this way and you thrust your hips, you're more attractive than in this way. But the point is, in that book, they studied one study, and basically they studied like thousands of people, and they analyzed their dreams, and they found, for men and women alike, that almost every person has had at least one homicidal dream where they've wanted to kill someone. And the great majority of those dreams, the context of them was towards a sexual rival. There's someone that was trying to compete for a girl they liked, or their partner, or their spouse. They were jealous or protective, and they dreamed killing that person. So what that's basically saying is that from a deep ancestral, primordial, genetic level, we have a tendency to almost lash out and kill other people for sexual comparison reasons. So that's quite dangerous. And if you look at the stats, one of the big reasons for homicide is jealousy for sexual reasons. So I haven't really talked about the number one biggest reason yet why it matters so much to stop comparing yourself. And that comes from the book, The How of Happiness. And in this book, this is a great book. It's one of my favorite books on the science of happiness. I plowed through a bunch of crappy books to find this one. But long story short, in the book, it's pretty comprehensive on what actually brings happiness, and the results are shocking. It's like simple stuff like gratitude exercises work much better than like buying yourself anything materialistic that involves money. You get used to it very quickly, and it doesn't make you happier for long. But the point of the book is, in one section, it really just summarizes the whole findings, and you discover that money doesn't really matter that much. Now, this is more towards social or status or social theme comparison, but the point is, a lot of people, the reason that they compare themselves to others is because someone has more money in some way, shape, or form. They have a better car. They have better clothes. They have a better life where they can spend more money, travel on exotic jets, travel to exotic places, and maybe they get to eat better foods, go to better restaurants, or date better women, and they think this is what will make you happy, and it doesn't. You get used to it very quickly. The scientific term, and again, read the book, The How of Happiness, if you want more details on this, but the term for this is basically hedonic treadmill. It's a scientific term that's described this. It's all very well documented and researched, and it's one of my goals to really bring this to prominence, because the general public, and it's been this way for years, most people, I live in America. I'm very well versed with everyone around me. They're just so consumed by spending money and making more. And despite all the research, and for me, I believe this for many years, and kind of made myself unhappy because of it. Most people think that the more money and fame and status you get, naturally, the more happy you get. Now, there is a correlation up until a certain point, which is roughly about a first world country median middle class income. And it makes sense. Before that, if you're in a third world country, you don't have basic necessities met. You don't have health insurance. You don't have survival resources. You don't have a security. You don't have food on the table every day. And so, of course, you're going to be happier if you have more money to make those more stable. But over time, after that becomes more, solid, the bang for your buck diminishes and diminishes and just drops more and more as you make more money. And I think that's really important because most people waste most of their life chasing something that they think will bring them happiness when it won't. And it's a great way to save yourself some time and money. And it really gets into deep thought, really. It gets into some really deep psychological, philosophical talk, which, again, I've done a lot of blog posts about this on my blog, and I don't want to get too deep here. So save that for another talk or for you to read on my blog. But it's really interesting because, some people, all they really want is to have fun. And they think that they have to sacrifice their whole life to get to that fun. When once you figure this all out, you may, I'm not saying you always do, but you may be able to have that fun now instead. And it doesn't require all this money. So again, other big podcasters like Tim Ferriss have talked about this in depth. I don't want to get too off track. Let's go back on topic here. So that's the main reason why this matters so well. But you probably already know that. You probably know it's an extremely unhealthy habit to be doing every day. And yet you still do it. Every day you compare yourself to other people. And you see that they have better, happier lives than you do. Seemingly. Now, we're going to cover that because especially on social media and the internet, that is so not true. And you probably already know where I'm going to get at, but I just really want to get into the depths because you may already know common sense. Oh, social media is a curated thing. But here you are still, watching and comparing yourself to people who are posting and showing off their seemingly better, happier lives on social media. So what do you do when you see these people and they're smarter and they're more involved socially and you're getting anxiety or stress and you want to control this because you're comparing yourself to others and it just feels really, really bad? Like, what do? They have richer lives. It just seems like they're having a blast. Well, first thing, of course, I already mentioned is out of the two, you want to emphasize, romantic forms of comparison more. Get rid of those first. So let's say you're on Instagram or Facebook or whatever social platform, and maybe you're on whatever. Some people, they go on websites and you see like all these rich people and you're jealous, or you see all these people with a lot of girls. Focus on getting rid of the girl comparison pictures first, because romantically that's tougher. And of course, this can happen in real life too. It's not always online. So in real life, you may have situations where maybe it's your people you work with or just people you bump into on a daily basis. And they're just having the time of their lives. They're popular. They have all these, attractive girls around them. And, you're just like, oh my goodness, that guy's just like, I can't believe this. I wish I was them. And you just get really, really maybe resentful. You need to cut that out first. Above someone who is maybe you're also comparing yourself to, who is more like social theme comparisons rather than romantic themes. So maybe it's cutting out that male rival who is you're comparing yourself to on a romantic level out of jealousy because he keeps trying to flirt with your girlfriend. You need to resolve that first before you resolve a social comparison theme thing like, this guy, he's just like more popular and he has more friends. And again, we go back to that study by Salovey because to explain that. Now, these, again, scientific studies are done with really, really rigorous research and so forth. Having said that, they can still be wrong. They're so much better than the pseudoscience that, like, you see these YouTube videos or dating coaches or whatever else. They'll throw out these like social experiments, or they say they'll test things out in the field with experiences themselves, and that's usually just like it's a pseudoscience. It's not really systematized. There's no real process. They're not controlling for variables like science, and so they're just like throwing crap against the wall, seeing what sticks, not really having a strict formula, and of course their results, then their discoveries are less trustworthy because of that. So that's why I turn to studies Although I'm a very skeptical person. And even this study that I mentioned, I mean, only 174 college students were assessed. Is that really a large enough sample size? Nonetheless, the point is, I still think it's still worth noting. But let's dive into actually some other stuff you can do to avoid comparison. So the next thing I want to consider is really celebrating, emphasizing, and appreciating the simple things in life. Now, Tim Ferriss, he has a similar process. It's called Stoicism, and it's basically a specific way of living that people did like thousands of years ago. And it's a very like simplistic way of living where you just appreciate the simple things. Like you might have, all you get to eat that day might just be like a piece of bread, but you appreciate that bread in your life. Even if your day was like really boring and simple, you appreciate that day. And of course, he practices that to extreme, and his following on his podcast, they follow that. Now, I think it's a bit too extreme, and like, I don't think the modern person has to do that. But I just kind of do a more modified version. It's not called like, it's not like extreme Buddhist thing. It's just simply, hey, I'm just going to, appreciate the simple things in life. And of course, if you look at monks or like some of the top religious people, like the Dalai Lama or Eckhart Tolle, both of these people, they live very simple lives. Like all they do the entire day is sit there, breathe air in and out, focus on the breath, meditate, appreciate their surroundings, be in the present moment, not worry about the future, and just like appreciate like the leaves on the trees, stuff that all of us have. And they're really happy. Like if you just watch some of their videos on YouTube, they're laughing, having a great time, and enjoying life. And it just really kind of speaks to the fact that, it's not necessary to have expensive things like jet planes to be happy. And honestly, most people in America are great examples. Although they're so unhappy, most middle-income families in America have better standards of living on every measure than the richest person in the world did 50 years ago. Think about it. They can travel to more places for cheaper. They have access to thousands of movies that cost millions of dollars each to make. That's entertainment that the richest pharaohs could not get. That's entertainment that Andrew Carnegie could not get, even if he paid through the roof for. And now we have it on Netflix, on YouTube for like $20 a month or even free. So it just blows your mind, and it goes on and on. Plumbing, indoor plumbing, access to gyms, access to food, restaurants, all this stuff, and yet so many people are still unhappy. It's just hedonic treadmill all over again. And so it's basically we take it for granted, just like a spoiled brat who has rich parents takes his life for granted because he's born into that standard. So the next tip I want to give you is a little fancy term I invented called voluntary deprivation. And it's a needlessly fancy term. It just basically means sometimes I'm just going to cut back on purpose. Even though I could have this luxury, I'm going to deprive myself a bit just so I can appreciate it more. Like let's say you get to eat lobster and steak and seafood and the most expensive foods in your area every single day. And guess what? You get used to them. And this has happened to me on like the smallest of scales. Like I used to love eating this chocolate called Ferrero Rocher. But it was only because I was pretty poor back then. And my parents could only afford one like a year. And so I would like treasure that thing, and it would taste amazing because I would look forward to that moment. But then I guess like the price went down or I made more money. But I bought a whole box of them, like literally like 50, and I could eat like as many as I wanted every day. And I got used to them really quickly. And it just like didn't taste good anymore. I wasn't much happier. So that happened. So what do? I stop eating them for a long time until I appreciate them again. Same thing for Chipotle, same thing for cheeseburgers, same thing for water. Water is something that I can take for granted. Like I want to prevent dehydration, which is something that I've struggled with in the past a tiny bit, not as much as other people in the fitness. But I remember one time where I went out on a jog and I didn't drink water, and it was 100 degrees outside and it was scorching desert like hot, and I pretty much was so parched, but there's no water around me anywhere. And when I finally got that sip of ice cold water after running out in the heat, it felt like heaven, even though it was just water. So water is the one thing I wouldn't recommend voluntary deprivation, because it can affect your dehydration levels. But anything else, really try it out. Like if it's something like a luxury, like chocolates or sweets, or a fancy restaurant with expensive food that you always go to, take a break and just eat plain healthy food. Maybe it's just brown rice, lean chicken, and broccoli for a couple weeks. And again, there's so many instances where I've tried this, sometimes just accidentally. One time I went from drinking apple juice and soda all day to nothing but water for many, many months. And then when I went back to apple juice, it was too sweet. Your tongue adjusts to different tastes. So that's that. Again, same thing applies to not just food or beverage, but also life in general. Like maybe it's just time to just tone it down. What most people do is if they have like all these girls in their life and they're not getting the same enjoyment, they get more. Just like drugs. Cocaine addicts, after taking a certain amount of hits of a drug consistently, their body gets used to it and they don't get the same high. So they get more and more drugs. They take more and more to achieve the same level of high until they overdose and kill themselves. There hits a point where it's just not going to work anymore. And, I'm not just pulling this out of my butt. I recently watched a Larry King interview of Dan Bilzerian, and he's supposedly worth $100 million. And he's basically said the same thing. He said that, now, since I'm so rich and I spend so money so excessively, I can go to the most expensive restaurant in the world and I cannot hit a even 6 or 7 out of 10 on the happiness scale anymore. But back when I just got out of the army, I could hit a 10 out of 10 just by going to the Outback Steakhouse, which is a pretty cheap restaurant for those of you who are not familiar with it. It's like a $20 a meal. And it's because in the military, you didn't have much food to eat. You had canned beans. And so it's the same type of thing. Rather than just like doing this thing where you just keep pushing up and up and up, just return to the simple things in life and appreciate them. Now, that's a lot easier said in theory than done in practice. How do I know? Because I still struggle with this. I say this to myself and it does help. But when you see someone and they're just like living it up, it's really, really tough. Like you see them and they're just like, they have that fancy car. Well, for me, it's not about the money. I'm not as, for me, I don't really get as envious about the money because I've basically studied so many successful people, and some of the richest people in the world, people who can buy 1,000 times more Lamborghinis than the rappers that you see, they're very, like, for example, Warren Buffett, he's the richest person in the world, or he was. His most expensive, car that he purchased was like a very humble, $50,000 car. And so for me, money is not really a comparison that's a big deal, but other things maybe. Like sometimes money still is. If I see them traveling on Instagram to all these exotic locations, or I see there's people with lots of girls in real life or on Instagram. That can get to you. So what do you do? I do still think that practicing these principles helps. And whether it's Eckhart Tolle, whether it's the book, The How of Happiness, all these different sources, they kind of say the same thing. It's a habit that takes practice to form. You're not going to get to the same level in the same time. You're still going to, it might just be slightly easier on day 2 when you practice it. It might be slightly easier on day 10. But it's not just going to happen overnight. You're still going to feel that angst. And so another tip that I'm working on implementing, and this is something that's very common with successful people, they set up systems so they don't even hit that point where they have to deal with that influence. So again, why deplete your limited willpower and energy by exposing yourself to needless temptation or anger or jealousy if you do not have to? I mean, jealousy is the one sin that isn't pleasurable. Why even bother with it, right? So for me, what I did was I deleted my Instagram. And this is something that's been on and off for years. But my biggest excuse was, this is social media research. I'm building my social media platform. And I would post like self-development quotes there all the time, trying to grow my Instagram page. And it's been years now, and it's been flat the entire time. I hit about 2,000 subscribers or 2,000 followers on there. Most of them are dead. I do get impressions, but no real engaging comments or anything else. And I decided it's just not worth the time, the energy, and the social comparison, sexual, romantic comparison drain on me. I'm going to delete it. So I finally deleted it. And so that's one way, a simple way of setting up a system where you don't even come into contact with that. Now, for other things, it may require a bit more work. For example, let's say you see these people in real life all the time. That may require something else. Maybe it's just, setting up a door or moving to an office where you don't see those people. Or it's putting on headphones so that you're more focused on yourself and you don't notice them. So now let's move into like, what if you're in like one of those like horrible situations where even that doesn't work? Let's just say, for example, you just can't move and you just see them all the time. So the last tip I have for you, and this is something that I stumble across and I'm working on developing, is basically diving into your own deep psychology. A lot of people shy away from this because it's painful. Sometimes it's about really asking yourself, why are you jealous? Why are you envious? And getting rid of that. And it's really tough. It's more about like personal growth, and it's not even personal growth. It's just like deep psychology, and it's not complicated. It's just asking yourself why, like really understanding what's going on. For example, if I were to do this for myself, it'd be something like this. It'd be, hey man, you see these hot girls. Why are you jealous? Why are you comparing yourself to them? Why aren't you good enough as you are? I think you're pretty good. I think you've accomplished a lot. You've launched this podcast. You're doing all this incredible, amazing stuff. You have this incredible blog with these amazing, well-researched posts on self-development. You're helping all these people who consume your stuff. Man, you're a great person. You're moving. You're growing. You're still fairly young. And you can maybe even surpass this guy one day. It might not happen overnight, but like, why does this matter? Why do you even want to surpass this guy? Like, why are you comparing yourself to other people when you are enough yourself? And then you really kind of dive in, and it can be painful, or sometimes it's not painful. It's just you don't really ever face these uncomfortable things, and therefore you never sort them out. And so the answer might be something like, I think I do this because, partially society is telling me that it will make me more happy. And now I know that that's not true. So I'm going to let that go. Or it could be, well, also partially because I just, I know it's not going to make me happier by that much, but I just want it. And it just really sucks to see this person flaunt it in my face. And then you might just really reason it out, think it through, and realize, there will always be rude people in this world, and sometimes you're just going to have to deal with them. Some people will flaunt it in front of you, and it just might suck. But people have gotten through this, and because they, for whatever reason, maybe they really understand the true value, and that type of flaunting just doesn't affect people who understand their value. Or it could just be something as simple as, hey, I am jealous and envious because it just seems like they're having such fun, amazing lives. They get to, have so much fun with so many incredible, amazing, fun, attractive, well-dressed people. And they're just having all this fun. And for me, I just feel like I'm missing out and I'm not having that fun. And that's something that's, again, if it gets too deep, then you might have to see a psychiatrist. Again, a podcast cannot answer every single question and solve every issue. But sometimes it's not as deep as that, and you can just solve it through by really just coming terms with the fact of why you're doing this and really figuring it out. It might just be, hey, it turns out, they may have a lot of fun, but, maybe one day you can have that fun too in your own way. Or maybe they're not having as much fun as they think, or maybe you don't need those people to have that fun. Or is it really that much better to have that much fun? Or are they really having that much fun? Or is it really that great? I don't want to overanalyze this or prompt you to overanalyze this, but it's just food for thought in terms of just coming to terms with that comparison. And of course, for me, I've definitely done that a lot better with the certain types of comparison. And, for me, I would say more than the average person for sure. I don't get fazed at all by someone who is richer than me or anything like that, because it's just the amount of, I've been exposed to thousands of really wealthy people through my studies of just watching thousands of interviews and books and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying it because after doing all that, you see hundreds of these people who have all this money and they don't spend it or they don't use it, and it doesn't make them much happier. And they the most successful, happy ones that I find, whether it's Warren Buffett, John Paul DeJoria, whatever, they derive their happiness from their job more than the money that they make, the results that they get. I mean, it's more about the journey than the destination. So for me, in that way, and also seeing all these people who have made 1,000 times more than the rappers or the people you see in real life who flaunt their money, and you see these people like Warren Buffett live such humble lives, you realize, you don't need to flaunt your money, show it off, spend it to enjoy life. And to see these people who have 1,000 times more not spend it and not show off how much they have, you realize that, their value and their success and their achievements comes from what they think is valuable, what they respect in themselves, not what others think of them, not whether or not other people know how much they make, not even if they have that much money. And so when I see it, and I've seen this so many times, it's just very tough for me to compare myself. So again, I'm starting to ramble. I could talk about this for a long time, but I'm going to cut it short here. Thanks for listening. And of course, if you want a part 2, or you want me to talk more about this, feel free to leave a comment or contact me through my blog, willyoulaugh.com. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next podcast episode. Subscribe to this podcast, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.